Friends, can you hear me? Friends, can you hear me? Can you hear me, friends? Testing 1, 2, 3. I don't know if you guys could hear me or not. This is the third time, and the microphone was working just fine. And now I'm in here trying to do a live stream, and there's nobody in here. Anyway, um, thank you. All good. Thank you. Now I don't know if this microphone is on. It says that the camera microphone is on. So I hope you guys could hear me. I'm just going to leave it alone. And friends, I can't explain what's going on with the microphone and the sound. And the only thing I could think of is that YouTube algorithms are doing something strange to this channel. Not surprised one bit, friends. So I'm going to just continue this. We're going to give everyone about 4 or 5 minutes to pile back in. I really appreciate it. So sorry for all of this confusion, friends. It's not anything I'm doing. I did a sound check about 30 minutes before I did a private live stream on my own, and it was working fine. The microphone was working fine. Everything was working fine. I said, all right, this looks good. Let's continue it. And now, I go live with you guys, and boom, microphone goes out. So anyway, we're just gonna do this. You're just gonna wait a few minutes. Anyway, today I'm gonna do another screen share here in a few minutes, and I'm gonna show you some of the slides. There's some new information in here that you guys, I don't know if many of you know about this, but I know many of you are fully awake about what's going on in the world. And some of you are new. I know there's a lot. I get a lot of new people, and they ask me a lot of questions. Uh, you know, but this is going to be really interesting presentation, especially when I get to the part about what's really going on. And you guys know that there's so much confusion right now, and what we're watching right now is a show. But I have to warn you guys, whatever you're listening to or whatever's going on in the world, always look for the hidden story or legislation that they're trying to pass during times like this. Okay? And this is not just in the United States, it goes for all countries. That anytime there is conflict, war, major news stories, always look for the smaller news stories that they're hiding from you. That's how they operate. So this is going to be very interesting, uh, you know, about what's going to unfold in the next 6 months, because I already see the writing on the wall. Like so many other truth seekers, we are seeing a lot of change coming, and the astrology indicates it as well. As you know, we're entering July, and July is not just the birthday of the United States, but it's also Uranus is entering the sign of Gemini. I do have charts, uh, you know, and so prepare yourselves the best way you can, because we're not living in Kansas anymore. Okay, let's put it that way. If you know what that reference means, we're not living in the same world anymore. And the powers that shouldn't be know this, and they're going to maximize the effort to try and change the system. Okay, and this is what I see, and the astrology is indicating it. So many of us are tuned in. We know what's going on. We know what's going to happen. And we are basically sitting there going, here we go. Here comes the major change that nobody wants. And they're going to push it through. These psychopath elite don't really care about humanity. And I've said this before. Their agenda is to keep the population under control through sterilization, through the arm needles, through food, distraction, all of that stuff. And those of us, the 10 to 15% of the population that sees through the illusion, people think we're crazy. People think we're conspiracy, nut jobs, but we're not. We're truthers. Anyway, we're going to start off in a few seconds, and I'm going to share my screen, and then hopefully that'll work too. But anyway, I'm going to click on this button. And so here we go. Let's go. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. Great. All right. Let me close that up and hide that. And let me start this presentation here. Hold on one second. I got to put the slideshow on. All right. So here we go, friends. Now, obviously, I call this one Remembering the 4th of July. Why? Why did I say that? Well, it's the birthday of the United States coming up, but I'm also saying it because this is the last 4th of July as we know the United States. Okay? I'm not trying to be dramatic or, any scare tactics or trying to frighten anyone, but remember the United States as it was, because from this point forward, there's no going back. Technology, the deep state, the psychopath elite are going to do their best to try and change this country and take it apart piece by piece. And they're already doing that in Europe. I mean, we see all the illegals coming into these countries and literally causing chaos. Do you think this is by mistake or accident? No. This is one of the game plans. Remember, I've always said that whoever's running this show might not even be human. Okay, I'll give you that. But whoever is in control that we notice and we know what's going on, basically is always trying to keep humanity at conflict, in conflict mode, in fear mode, in doubt mode. And they are master manipulators. They're evil geniuses, as I always like to say. So if you live in the United States, this is the last 4th of July as you know it. Because after this, I promise you, the country's going to be completely different by next year. Okay? And I'm basing that on astrology, visions, what I know what's going on politically and behind the scenes. So what is the 4th of July? It's the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed by the founding fathers. A day that basically said, we are independent sovereign beings. We do not want any connection to England, and we don't want anything to do with them. We want to just live our lives in peace here in this new country. Okay, it wasn't really a country then, but there were 13 colonies, and they just want to be left alone. And so they created this document, and and the rights that go along with it, and basically said, we want our own nation. We want to be separate from any other controlling bodies. And for a short period of time, this was successful, but it didn't come without a cost. Of course, there was the American Revolution. Now, many of you that have been watching me for a while, you know what I've been talking about. So, the American Revolution was a political battle that took place between 1765 and 1783, during which the colonists in the 13 American colonies rejected the British monarchy and the aristocracy and overthrew the authority of Great Britain and founded the United States of America. That is the story, basically, in a nutshell. They did not want, what was his name, King George III, to control them anymore. But if you think King George was just going to let them go, no way in hell. This is why we fought this American Revolution, to break away from the King of England. Okay, because the King of England, if you understand the British Empire and what they've done throughout history, they've gone around the world and controlled different regions of the planet by invading them, by taking them over, by cutting deals. Many of the countries had resources and so on. But when these colonists said, we don't want any part of England, we want to be left alone. And this is the sentiment that is in the United States today. Many of us understand that concept. Our rights do not come from a government, they come from the creator. You call it whatever you want. I call it creator. And so, our rights, our natural God-given rights, come from the creator. So these people understood this. They created an amazing document that basically outlines just the fundamental basics of humanity, no matter who you are. Okay? So this was an amazing time. But also at this time, I want to bring to your attention, Uranus was in Gemini. Now, this is very important because this is a very rebellious alignment. We have Uranus, which is the sign of rebellion, which is the sign of friction, which is the sign of chaos, which is the sign of surprises, which is the sign of revolution. Okay, we astrologers know all this. And it was in Gemini, the sign of communication, the sign of communicating with others and wanting something different and not wanting to be a part of the same system over and over again. Now, when you look at the United States' birth chart, and this is the one most of us Western astrologers use, we see that the moon was also in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. So we see here, this is where the United States gets its rebellious gene. The moon in Aquarius in the third house. This is about speaking your truth or being rebellious or not wanting to go along with something. And with Uranus in Gemini, which is very important right now, because it's going to enter Gemini again on July the 7th. And I'll cover that in another chart. But this is why we astrologers are all going, the world is going to change, especially the United States, because of technology, because people are going to continue to be rebellious, because people don't want the same garbage over and over again. So we're going to see this rebellious energy continue in the next 7.5 years in the United States. We've already seen some of it, and we're going to continue to see a whole lot more. But let's move forward, because 84 years later, roughly, we had another conflict, which was the US Civil War. And Uranus again was in Gemini. Now, I want to point something out here, because I'm not a historian, but I've read history, and I understand it from sort of a truth seeker's perspective. When the colonies broke away, you had the King of England constantly badgering the colonists. I want to print your money. I need to be a part of your new system. And this was what the Boston Tea Party was all about. The colonists said, you're taxing our tea. Tariffs. Sound familiar, friends? What do we have today with Donald Trump? Right? He's implementing new tariffs. But my point being is the colonist says, we don't want any part of your system. What don't you understand? And there's evidence all throughout history from the presidents like President Jackson and other writers basically saying that they are trying to force their will on the new colonies and wanting to create a central bank, which is basically creating the currency for the nation at interest. Money that does not exist, they want to create and control. Now, if you understand how banking really works, this is very important, because this is what we have around the world. But during the Civil War, there is, again, Uranus entered Gemini once again. This happens around every 84 years. Okay, now this is very important to understand. This is not a docile energy. This is where the people rise up and they literally try and fight the system. Unfortunately, the ones that are doing it today are directing their energy to the wrong person. They're directing it towards, President Trump. They should really be directing it towards the bankers, to the secret societies and the families that are hiding in the shadows. Why don't we ever see protests at like the big banks? Why don't we ever see that? Protests like at Citibank or at Bank of America or the Federal Reserve. Why don't we ever see that? Because those are the real power brokers. And it goes deeper than that. But I'm just giving you an example. So we have people rebelling against the wrong people. Anyway, here is the family. I'm not going to mention their names, but many of you already know this. This is just one of the major families that was influencing the United States. They set up what was called charter banks. They were given charter banks after basically, torturing, bribing, and trying to convince some of the colonists to let them, open up a bank charter. And they would do it. But they allowed them to do it for only 20 years at a time. Okay, and then they had to renew the charters. So they finally, after causing conflict, and by the way, there's overwhelming evidence that this family funded the skirmishes that we had all along in the early time of the United States, like the 1812 war. They were behind it. They were the ones behind bringing in prisoners to to the south, to Louisiana, to the southern states. They weren't states back then, but they were the ones bringing in people that were, out of prison or in mental institutions. They brought them down to the south, just like they did with Australia. Australia was a penal colony. They brought all of their people from prison and mental institutions to these places to basically, uh, not control, but cause chaos. And I'm not saying everyone was in these prisons or penal colonies or institutions, but there's evidence that they were funding operations to make it tougher for the colonies to have a peaceful existence. That's what I'm getting at. And there's overwhelming evidence that they were also the ones, influencing the Civil War, because Abraham Lincoln was writing about how they were going broke and how the Tsar of Russia was willing to help, President Lincoln with his battle, because the Tsar knew how corrupt the bankers were. So there's overwhelming evidence that these wars, conflicts, and skirmishes were all funded by this family, and primarily, okay? And they were the ones behind. If you do some honest research about this family, keep all the bullshit aside, but do an honest research. It's overwhelming how they have influenced most of Europe and the world through controlling the monetary system. So why is this important? Because after the Civil War, the country was broke. And then came the Act of 1871. Now, what this was basically the banks basically said, okay, we're going to help you rebuild the country, but we want something in return. So in that, Act of 1871, there was a clause that said the 10 square miles around Washington City was a city here. Okay, this was a city. It wasn't a district. They said, we want that to be our headquarters. We want that piece of property. And so, the new administration, and after Lincoln was killed, the new administration and everyone else said, okay, we'll go along with the program. We need to rebuild the country. So they took the bankers' money at interest, by the way. I believe it was something like 40% on every dollar that they loaned them. So talking about loan sharking, basically. But more importantly, they wanted the district. So they got it with the Act of 1871. So I found this online, which basically encapsulates it the best. The Act of 1871 also created a separate form of government for the District of Columbia. Notice it's no longer the Washington City, it's the District of Columbia. If you understand what the word Columbia means, it's linked to the Vatican, which is a 10-mile square parcel of land and is governed within the British Admiralty Law, UCC. Research this, look it up for yourself. We are under Admiralty Law, British Admiralty Law. The Acts of the 41st Congress, Section 34, Section 3, Chapters 61 and 62, an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. In other words, friends, those of us that have gone down the rabbit hole, the District of Columbia, the Vatican, and London City are all independent governments that are not controlled by the governments in power there. In other words, Washington, D.C. is its own nation with its own laws. It doesn't abide by other laws of other states. This is what people don't understand, that they set up their own country within the United States. This is the sort of the headquarters of the United States corporation. So they basically changed everything in the United States with this act. Now, what made it even worse is they created that Federal Reserve that they've always wanted, which is a system for creating money at interest, loaning the government interest, money that does not exist, at interest. And Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat president, basically had a gun to his head and said, I'll sign this document. If he didn't do it, they would have gotten somebody else to do it. So here in 1913, under the Federal Bankers Reserve Act, Woodrow Wilson created this Federal Bankers Act to prevent financial panics that occurred during the early 1900s. Panics that were all caused by that one family. So why was the central bank organized needed? To control the monetary system, which in turn controls the politicians. Do you understand what I'm saying, friends? This is why it's so frustrating when people start going, well, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a this, I'm a that. No, you don't understand. These people in Washington, D.C. are basically being blackmailed, bribed, or extorted in one way or another. All of them. And there are a handful of them that are very rebellious on both sides of the aisle that don't want to go along with the program. And they're the ones that get funded. When they're up for re-election, they are basically tons of money pours in against them. Okay. And this is not me saying this. These are the actual senators and the Congress people that have spoken out after they got out of office. Okay. So research it for yourself. But this has been the controlling factor in the United States. So you wonder why we have debt. You wonder why there's military spending. You wonder why they start government programs, because every dollar that the government creates is borrowed from the Federal Reserve System at interest. So who benefits? The people that run the Federal Reserve, the banks that are connected to the Federal Reserve, the families that are connected to the Federal Reserve. Do you not see that, friends? Okay? This is the man who basically is a rock star in the truther movement. This is G. Edward Griffin, and he's got tons of videos on YouTube and Rumble. He wrote a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Excellent. He talked about how these secret families went to this island in Georgia, and they basically hashed out this Federal Reserve banking system as we know it. This is the guy. This is the man. This is the superstar. Okay? And research it. Buy his book. Listen to him talk on YouTube. This is the guy who will tell you, outline it, how bad it is. Okay? Let's fast forward again. Let's go back to the astrology. Guess what happened during the World War II? And by the way, everyone knows that all the wars and skirmishes are all banker wars or conflicts, because when they happen, they get to lend money to these governments at interest. So they don't really care what side wins. They just want to make money. They want to control the politicians. And this happens all around the world. And we have World War II. World War II. While the U.S. involvement in World War II began in the late 1941, Uranus had entered Gemini in August of 1941 and remained there until September 1948. Once again, we're seeing Uranus in Gemini having this tremendous influence over the world at this time. So we have it three times: the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and now we have World War II. And so unfortunately, friends, when you keep seeing a repeating pattern, you got to scratch your head and go, holy shit, wow, what's going on here? And so this is what we see. We astrologers that see this. We're seeing repeating patterns again. July the 7th of this year, which is I'm doing this on the 29th, only about a week away. Gemini, Uranus goes into Gemini once again. The only difference this time is we have technology that is beyond the average person's comprehension. Okay? And there's hidden technology that's going to be coming out as well. So it's a revolution of ideas, communication, technology, community. Uranus represents communities, commerce, and transportation. All of these things are going to be super highlighted in the next 7 years. And the United States is again front and center for these changes. We are seeing it in other countries, no doubt about it. Europe, in Canada. Well, it's harder in Canada, but we're seeing it around the world. So we're going to see more world events taking place with technology and change that is coming. There's no stopping it, friends. Even if we try to just basically, don't want to be a part of this system, somehow, some way, they're going to force it upon us. Okay? So are we seeing some of the remnants of the Gemini in, Uranus in Gemini already? Yes, of course. We are seeing. You think this is happening by accident, friends? That Iran gets attacked by this country and then the United States? Huh? Do you think it's happening by mistake? No, no way in hell. They know the astrology. They know when the timing is right to cause as much chaos. So this is very important right now, friends. We are watching a dog and pony show, because it's distracting us from other things. Okay, we're seeing very similar scenarios once again. This is again the average person that is clueless about what's really going on. And they're rebelling because they feel the energy of Uranus and Gemini going, I don't want this anymore. I'm frustrated with my life. I can't pay my rent and my bills. And, the frustration level is going up. I totally understand that. And these people don't see a way out. So they're rebelling. And mostly, I hate to say it, friends, the blue cities and states, because they have already basically acquiesced to the powers that shouldn't be. In other words, everything is a giveaway. The government's going to give you this. The government's going to take care of you this. All we want is your freedom, and you acquiesce into our system. And these people don't see this. They don't see it. They just see it as a handout or somebody helping them. And they're, okay, great, let's go along with the program or whatever else is going on, funding operations and protests and all this other stuff. Okay, but we're seeing very similar scenarios to these last 3 times Uranus was in Gemini. Here's the new moon, and I talked about how we were going to see major changes coming, and Donald Trump was going to be front and center, and we're seeing it. We're absolutely seeing it. Since the new moon, there have been some major developments that occurred that went in favor of President Trump. Okay, but we're seeing it. But here is the big one, and I did say in one of my previous videos, because of Mars being in the 9th house, the 9th house of astrology, and by the way, these are all constellations. That's all they represent. They're all symbolic of energy. The 9th house represents higher courts, the legal system. And I did say, watch for judgments or legal matters that are going to be front and center. And I did say that. So you can check it out for yourself. And this is what's being indicated here. And so what happens? Just this week, the Supreme Court rules in favor of Donald Trump and his administration about, a 6-3 ruling that basically says the lower courts, the federal courts in these blue districts, cannot rule and slow down an elected president because the president has tremendous power through the executive, and we have these judges throughout the last 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even more, that have been implementing their will against the president. And that's illegal. In the Constitution, it does not say that these federal judges have power over the executive branch. So they ruled 6-3 in favor of the Trump administration. So that's a big win because now he's going to push forward his agenda for what he sees and how he wants to build the country. There was also this one that was super important, this birthright citizenship. Now, they're going to look this over, and I believe it's October. Now, this is huge because this one, and this sounds really crazy, friends, but I've read story after story of people, women that are pregnant coming from either China or Mexico or the third world countries, okay, that basically in their last trimester of giving birth, they're pregnant. And they're coming here on visas and on vacations or even, student visas. They're coming here and giving birth to their children on U.S. soil so they could become citizens. And this is happening in droves, especially with the Chinese people. Now, I'm just reading this, what's been going on in California. This has been coming from California. You could research this yourself. But this is what I'm talking about. So we know that there's a sort of, I don't want to say an invasion, but yes, I would say there's an abundance of people that are coming in here that are not going through any system whatsoever except trying to get here as quickly as possible to become U.S. citizens. So this is another ruling that basically stops, for the moment, stops this, this birthright citizenship stuff. So Trump is going to continue to stop or slow it down so that way, we don't have as many coming in. So anyway, these are the stories that look favorable on the surface, okay? But there's something else you need to know, and this is what I'm talking about, friends. While this dog and pony show is going on in the Middle East, while the Supreme Court justices are ruling in favor of the Trump administration, this is sneakily going through. And this is very important, friends. Okay, and I have to be careful what I say here. This is why right after this, I'm going to be going into my private community and we'll be discussing it even more. The Genius Act. was secretly passed by the Senate on June the 18th. And what is this you say? This is about cryptocurrency and about digital identification. Now, why isn't this on mainstream media? Why? Because they're focusing all their attention on the Supreme Court did this, and they're they're going to make a big deal out of it, and the Middle East and what's going on. As you could see, the distraction here. Okay, and this is very important. What have I been saying, and many other truth seekers saying? Watch how they begin to implement the digital currency, and how there's going to be digital identification, and how there's going to be new money being made. This Genius Act, and you could research it for yourself, it is about regulating and basically controlling cryptocurrency, because the United States has to go in that direction where it has to create a new digital currency, because let's face it, the people behind Mr. Trump are all in technology, from Elon Musk to Alex Karp to all these other clowns. Okay, Thiel, all of them, they're backing Mr. Trump because they want something, and they know what they're doing, friends. And I've said this before, you have to watch carefully what's going on. Don't just blindly support somebody. Now, I have said I have supported Donald Trump because he is showing you how bad the system. He's revealing things, and I applaud him for that. But he's also a deal maker. So he's going to compromise in certain areas. So this is where we have to be very vigilant right now about what's going on. And this is a big issue. But I want to just read some things here to you that's in this. Okay, and I got this from one of the online posts. Okay, so on June 16th, the Genius Act, or Guiding and Establishing National Invocation for U.S. Stablecoin Act, passed by the U.S. Senate. All right, establishing a federal framework for regulating stable coins. Now, why are they regulating it? Because if stable coins or cryptocurrency was left by itself, you would never know who is sending money to who. So they're trying to control who, so they don't control the coins, they control the people that sell the coins, like Coinbase and some of these other places. Like, you have to register with them. They know exactly what they're doing, okay? Because they're setting up a digital system that everyone's going to have to be on. This coincides with the heightened war in the Middle East tensions, the U.S.-backed strikes. I'm not going to, again, I got to be careful what I say here. Despite claims of successful attack, no evidence of destruction or fallout, blah, blah, blah. The Genius Act regulates digital dollar infrastructure, requiring stablecoin issuers to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering rules. You see what I'm saying, friends? This is all bullshit, because the biggest criminals in the world are organized government. Okay? They are the biggest criminals in the world. That's the biggest organized criminal network. And there's another one higher than them, and that's religion. And this is not me saying, this is years of research, friends. You have criminal enterprises that are hiding as, we are do-gooders. We are here to help humanity. Bullshit. Okay? Organized religion and governments. Organized crime at the highest levels. And don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Critics on X warning that it enabled biometric ID integration and financial behavior monitoring, drawing parallels to China's social credit score. I mean, you could just read this. You could stop this and read this for yourself. This is where it's heading, friends. Now, I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm trying to share information that you need to pay attention to while the dog and pony show is going on in Washington and around the country, with protests and Middle East conflicts. It's all happening on purpose right now to distract from this. That's what's important here, friends. And I'm not the only one saying it. These two wonderful women here are the powerhouses of truther movement. Whitney Webb and Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine Austin Fitts was in government. She worked for the Bush administration, the first one, and they threw her under the bus. Whitney Webb has written some amazing articles, has done some amazing work on discovering the connection between these deep state bankers and the governments around the world. Okay, these two are leading the charge. I give them a lot of credit. And then you got people like James Corbett, which the Corbett Report, love the guy. He's another guy that puts out amazing. Derek Bros. These guys, these folks are real truth seekers. They connect the dots for you. So I would research anything from these two. Okay, So they've been talking about it for years, years, what the scheme is. And by the way, Catherine Austin Fitz has been in banking her whole life. She's been on the inside. She knows how it works. And Whitney Webb is just a very smart lady that really knows her stuff. So these are the two you need to pay attention to. Okay? So here is Uranus entering Gemini on the 7th, and how important it's going to be right there. You see it? So as Uranus, I'm expecting something, and this happens a couple of days after the 4th of July. So I'm expecting either something to happen on the 4th of July, a major announcement, another ruling, maybe some conflict, who knows? Okay, I think it's going to be more legal matters or communication related issues. Or on the 5th and the 7th. So the 4th, the 5th, and the 7th, these are days where the energy is very high. And again, I do this weekly astrology in my private community. This is how I kind of know what's going to happen ahead of time, So again, if you want to join, there's a link down below, free 7-day trial. Check it out. I'll be on there right after this presentation. So we are seeing some major developments. When I say we astrologers, around the 4th, July the 4th, the 5th, or the 7th. Okay, so again, it could be as simple as another major announcement or another executive order. And by the way, it's in Gemini. Donald Trump is a Gemini. So for the next 7 years, the Trump family, and especially Donald Trump, is going to continue to be in the spotlight, surprising people. But it'll happen very quickly because it seems like time is accelerating also. So here it is. And in the United States' chart, it has a lot to do with the 6th house, which is the daily routine, which is taking care of health matters, taking care of the small details on a regular basis. And when this Uranus conjuncts this Uranus, which is, I believe, going to be in 2027, okay? I didn't look it up. I should have, but I didn't get a chance to look it up. That's when some of the major changes really get implemented, whether it's new technology, innovation, changes to weather patterns, new technologies that are really strange, like holographic stuff, or weapons, okay, or new implementations to control humanity. This is all a part of that. So right away, we're going to see the energy shifting right here on July the 7th, right away. And we're going to feel it. We're going to see it. We're going to sense it. Something's off. Our minds are going to become super active. Uranus in Gemini could be a genius level, where people just have, these thoughts about how to create new technology or futuristic visions. This is how it works, you see. So this is going to be very important. Now, there's also the downside to this, and that has to do with people losing their marbles, like this story here in Texas. Here's this elderly black woman who decides to put a lawn chair or whatever, some sort of chair, on the middle of the highway on I-45 with a gun in her hand, waving it around, while there's traffic going by, right in the middle of the highway. That's the downside to Uranus in Gemini, is more and more people are going to lose their sense of reality because they don't understand what's happening to them. And this is just one example. The protests are another, and people getting rebellious is going to be another side effect of Uranus in Gemini. So I'm just pointing it out, friends. In the next 7 years, it's going to get really, really interesting. The other thing that I'm overly concerned about is this. Now, again, I have to be careful what I say here. This criminal organization is warning that the industry is might have this going on right here. And this came out on the 28th. So recently, this was yesterday. So there's several reports of this. Okay, this is from CNN, the Criminal News Network. So here we have more stories that are being either leaked out or trying to cause fear or havoc. And remember, Uranus is sudden change, sudden disruption, chaos, out of nowhere. That's Uranus. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. And Gemini has to do with communication, all forms, and transportation. So here we are, planes, trucks, ships, all of that stuff. Here's the astrology I went over. You can see that it's going to be a very tricky July because we have several planets going retrograde, including Mercury. So I would definitely be careful driving or flying or doing anything with boats and all this other stuff. And then Venus enters Cancer, which is the United States. So we're in for a bit of a wild ride in July. Okay, so I'm not saying it's all going to be bad. I'm just saying the energy is going to start to change and feel very strange. Okay, I talked about this in the new moon outlook here, new moon of cautious optimism. You might want to check it out. Just put this title in YouTube and put my name in there, Joseph P. Anthony. You'll see it. Watch the video. But I also do a monthly newsletter, totally free. Just got to go to my website and sign up for it, astrologerjoe.com. Click on the newsletter, put your name and email address. You only get maybe 1 or 2 emails a month. That's it. We don't sell your name. We don't give it out to anyone. We try and keep everything, really in order and, without overwhelming people. But anyway, I'm going to be on the call with my team and my members. So if you want to join and for 7-day trial, there's a link down below. We do the extended horoscopes, the weekly astrology overview video. I teach astrology. Today we're going to be going into notable figures, notable public figures in the last week or two. I'll be covering that in the call. And of course, the members get to ask me questions, and sometimes they give me their charts and they want me to just quickly look over it. I don't have a problem with that. And so consider joining. There's a link down below. Anyway, let me stop this video and get out of here. And let me see here. Hold on a second. Let's see. Stop sharing. Okay, there we are. Okay, so hopefully everyone heard that. Looks like the sound is still on, fortunately. So after the third, the third time is a charm. But anyway, I just wanted to give you that heads up on what's happening from an astrological point, from the spidey senses, that they're absolutely in for some really transformational times. And there's a lot of components to it, from the technology side of information, but always look for those hidden stories that are related to the digital stuff, IDs, money systems, because that is being pushed really hard right now. And that's how they're going to control humanity in the future if we don't wake up and say, nope, we don't want any part of that. And maybe Donald Trump does something miraculous to slow it down. Again, maybe. And we'll see what happens. So this is why we have to keep an eye on all these people and what's going on. All right. Anyway, I am going to, let's see. Yeah, it's almost time. I'm going to give people enough opportunity to jump into the call. So I'm going to stop this presentation right now, give people a few minutes if they want to join, link down below, or just go to astrologerjoe.com and you'll click on that button there and just prepare for my Zoom call. All right, so have a great Sunday. I hope we'll get this microphone nonsense fixed for next time. And, have a great 4th of July celebration, whatever you're going to be doing. And those of you that don't live in the United States, celebrate life in general. You're alive in a suit having an experience. That's something to celebrate in itself. Okay. So anyway, have a great Sunday, folks. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the Zoom call in a few minutes. All right. Bye for now.